Hello my barbecue friends, and tonight on the menu we are doing a smoked and fried pork tenderloin sandwich. So right now what I'm going to go over is kind of how I prep for that. Now we got some beautiful pork that was on sale at my local Kroger's. What we're looking for is the larger portion of the meat, the meatier meat. We're going to kind of round that off, trim anything that looks loose, stuff like that. That's just not going to be good to try to pound out. So try to get as much extra fat off as possible, just like in every other barbecue video that's on the market right now. And definitely try to get a lot of that silver skin. I use a boning knife. I also use a fillet knife too for some things that make it much harder to get to. So we'll kind of show you guys that. And that silver skin is something that looks like that. That's actually on the actual pork tenderloin. It's just stuff that's not going to break down or taste very good in the actual cooking process. So we're going to go ahead and get that trim off. Some of it's much easier than others. I'm going to show you on one just for the sake of the video right here. And then once we get this trimmed up, we are going to pound it flat. And give me a second here. I'll kind of go over that for you too. So again, once you get that silver skin on, this one didn't have a whole lot. There's not a lot really I want to trim off. I like to do pretty much like dinner cuts, you know, save as much meat on the loin or barbecue meat as possible. And if you're wondering what the apron says, it says I love to rub my meat, right? So now that this is trimmed up, what I'm looking for is I want a nice sandwich size pork tenderloin. Some people beat these bad boys until they're sized your head and they're paper thin. Me, I like a meatier, heftier pork tenderloin. So what I'm going to do is use my fist. So what I like to do here is pretty much take that tenderloin about the width of my fist, and then I'm going to cut it right here. And that's going to flatten out to be a nice meaty sized tenderloin sandwich. So I'm going to do this here. This other tenderloin, that's going to be another video that I'm going to do later. I've got a separate recipe that I'm going to cook for meal prep. I like to cook a lot of my meats during the weekends so that when I'm running my busy life during the weekdays, it's much easier to just grab something out of the freezer, thaw it out, throw it in whatever I'm doing, whether it be tacos, salads, etc. Pre-cooked meat is a blessing. So now that we got that wonderful pork tenderloin that looks amazing, oh, we got a little bit right there that just trimmed off a little bit more. We're going to pound this bad boy flat, so this is where we get it. I'm going to start with the larger size. This is really going to flatten out, then move to the second, and then finally the flattened sides to get it to the most consistent size that I want. So go ahead and continue that out. Now that I'm about there, it's kind of flattened down. I'm going to go to the smaller one. And what I also like to do is kind of pull while I'm hitting. So that's going to help create that flattening out. And you can actually see that that's a great size as of right now. I'm going to kind of tenderize the other side as well. You can see that that tenderloin just flattened out wonderful. And then we're finally going to go to the flat side. You want it nice, even, because of how this is going to smoke and how this is going to fry. You wanted it to be as consistent as possible all the way through there. So if you see a higher spot in the meat, just go ahead and beat that down. So that's what it should look like. We go from this to this. You can actually see that it's taken a lot of the actual meat down and broken it down. That's a really tender cut of meat. This is going to smoke very quick, and I'll go over that here in a second with you guys. So let me finish beating this down real quick. That Sunday barbecue, man, it's some of my favorite things to do. You know, when you're sitting at home, all you're doing is running chores, you just fire up that smoker and have a good old time. And we'll go to the third side of the flat and take it down where it needs to be. Don't be afraid to hit it. I mean, it is a tender cut of meat, but you don't want to over flatten it either, because then you're paper thin. That's just not my type. If you like paper thin tenderloins the size of your head, please feel free to go ahead and beat that bad boy till it's paper thin. That's just not type of me. Some of this raw meat that's left over, I do give it to my dogs. It's not the most sanitary things, but they are dogs. They eat meat naturally over time. So now that we got these done right here, we are going to take out my seasoning. Now again, how we're going to do this pork tenderloin is we're going to smoke it to roughly about 120 degrees, right? We need about 45 degrees still left on there, so when I batter it and fry it, it's not completely dried out. This is a lean piece of meat, even though it is pork, so we don't want to overcook it. So we're going to smoke it, and then we're going to fry it. So what I'm going to do here is I got just a simple standard barbecue rub. You can see that wonderful color in the jar. And yes, I do use mason jars with shaker tops. Why is that? Well, I prefer to get a better airtight seal than your store-bought seasonings that you see over there in the corner. There's nothing wrong with them, don't get me wrong, because I buy them like crazy. But what I'm getting at here is I like to store them in glass, because the plastic over time just tends to break down and get in the seasonings, and it's much harder to do. So just a light rub on the actual meat itself from whatever you need to, and then we just right over the top. Most people tell you about 12 inches off the meat. It gives you really nice even coating, and I'll grab that here in a second and show you what that looks like if you're paying attention. So that's it. This is prepped, ready to go for the smoker. And again, I'm going to throw these on the smoker. A thin cut of meat like this, half hour, 45 minutes. What I like to do to get the flavor involved in the actual pork tenderloin or these quick cut cooks is, one, I like to cook on a very low heat. Why? So that it spends more time in the smoke. So we're talking 200 to 225 max low slow on this type of cook. The bigger meats I do usually cook around 275, 250. Those are the ones I like. That's my butter zone for efficiency in meat. On the bigger cuts like your pulled porks, your briskets, even ribs, I do that at that temperature as well. But when you do a lower smoke temperature for that cook, what happens is I get more smoke into the meat without overcooking the actual meat on these thinner cuts that you see here. And when I do those thinner, quicker cooks, let's call them, I like to use heavier, more pronounced wood, something like hickory. For the longer smokes, I like to use lighter woods with hickory mixed in, typically cherry, apple, your fruit woods that are out there. Up here in the north, you don't get many of the hardwoods outside of oak. Very rarely can you find hickory up here. It's a fight to get that as well. Plenty of oak, plenty of cherry. Fruit woods are hit and miss. But anyways, I'll babble on forever. I'm sure I'm going to clip that out because it's going to take way too long. But the meat seasoned, the smoker's already rolling. It's rolling about 225 degrees right now. So I'm going to go out there, I'm going to throw that on there, and I'm going to take the video out with me here in a second and show you guys kind of what the setup looks like. It is a backyard setup, so it's nothing fancy by any means. So I'm going to take off my gloves here, stop the video. All right, guys, I'm back again. The Oklahoma Joe's offset smoker is running about 240 right now. I'm going to give it some time before I throw some more hickory in there. However, it's a perfect time to throw this actual pork tenderloin on here. Again, we're doing a smaller cook because it's just me tonight, so something simple. 2 sandwiches is plenty for me. You can actually see here that the seasoning is well coated on there, and we're just going to throw them over to the cooler side. This, I've got it set up with that baffle plate where this runs pretty even in temperature. However, the side closest to fire is always going to be about 5 to 10 degrees hotter. I've got a water pan in there just to keep things moist, and remember, this is going to be about a half-hour cook. I'd recommend about 20 minutes after throwing them onto the smoker that you come out here and actually check the temperature. Temperature is a lot on this pork because we are still frying it. So we're going to let that come back up to heat. Once it starts coming back down, you know how it rides up and down on offset smoker, especially the smaller backyard ones. We're gonna come back out here and throw some hickory on it. So stay tuned, guys. Look at that beautiful barbecue view. Beautiful winter sunset here in Indiana. Got the smoker fired up, checking on these actual pork tenderloins. Oh, they're looking great. They're starting to get a good color on them. It's been about 15 minutes. I'm gonna tempt them here in about another 5 or 10. So stay tuned, guys. Welcome back, my friends. We've moved on. The pork tenderloin is actually out of the smoker. You can actually see the wonderful color on that. We got a good smoke ring on it. It smells wonderful. The seasoning adhered wonderfully. I'm going to say wonderful another 10 times. So let's just get to it. What I got here for the mix is I have my flour, egg wash, and breadcrumbs, right? And let me tell you something. You need to season your flour when it comes to anything that's fried. Look at me. Season your flour. That gives it the best base. So what we're going to do is tenderloin's going to go into the flour. Remember, dry hand, wet hand, right? That's going to give it a light base for the egg wash to adhere to it. This is a smaller little thing, so we're going to give it a little dippy do. The tenderloin rested for about another 10 minutes or so. After the wash is out, look, we got good adhesion on that egg because of the flour. We're going back into that seasoned flour, right? Back in there again, and then one more time in the egg wash. So it's a double batter with the flour, egg wash, flour, egg wash, and then we're going to go right directly into our seasoned breadcrumbs right here in the middle. And again, we're going to get that in there real nice like. Again, I just told you use one wet, one dry, and I just put one hand in all of them. Go figure. That's what happens when you're trying to record and not pay attention. So that's again, and guess what? We're going back in the egg wash. This is going to build up a nice fat crust on that pork tenderloin. It's going to make it a really enjoyable piece of meat once it comes out of that fryer. So back in there. And then once that one's done there, kind of coat the edges. We'll kind of shake off the excess. We're going to put that right back on our cook pan. And I'll show you a picture of that here in a second. I'm going to go ahead and do the second one. Flour. Egg wash. Now what's in the egg wash is just farm fresh butt nuggets. I have my own chickens outside right now and ducks. But unfortunately the ducks aren't laying as often as I would like to. I do enjoy duck eggs over chicken eggs. In my opinion, the yolks are twice as big. Back in the flour, let me kind of shake that around. Get good adhesion on that. The thing about partially cooked meats is you do have a hard time sometimes getting batters to stick to them, so that's why I'm kind of going overkill with all this. So we've been in the flour twice, and now we're going to go back into the breadcrumbs twice as well. Switch up fingers that are less goopy. Shove that in there. Unfortunately, all this is for 2 tenderloins because I eat most of the meat by myself, which is not a big problem, right? The more meat, the merrier. And once that's done, we go one more time into those wonderful panko crumbs. Now, I seasoned the panko crumbs. The flour was seasoned with a barbecue seasoning. The actual panko was done with Heat Riles garlic jalapeno. I absolutely love the flavor of that. So it looks like our pork tenderloin has been completely breaded. And I'll pop a little top to show you real quick, get it real close in there. You can actually see that that's pretty breaded fairly well. Nice thick crust. We're going to move it on over to the fryer. The fryer is actually in a cast iron pan. I'm going to go move this. I'm going to grab you. Okay, we do have a light smoke on the vegetable oils. So it tells me that that oil is ready to go. I'm going to move you over here. Excuse this. This is a home, right? So I'm going to grab my tongs here because I don't mess around with hot oil. As a young kid, I was a fry cook for many years, so we want to make sure that, oh, beautiful. Right on top, we are frying with the vegetable oil, unfortunately, today. That's all I had left. I was running out of it, so we're going to let this actually brown up. The pork is actually almost fully cooked outside. We're at 120 degrees, so we're going to let this sit in there for probably about 5 to 7 minutes. Temp it, make sure everything's golden brown and delicious, pull it, drain it, pat it, and we'll build our sandwich from there. All right, my friends, there you have it. The tenderloin came out nearly perfect. The second one, mind you. Key note here, when you put something in the fryer, pay attention, because it does get, well, overcooked. It's edible, but not to the point. But the second one was a huge success compared to my first one, and that's why we always make 2. So here's the layout here. It's kind of a traditional, non-traditional Penguin Point style, I guess you can say. Wonderful bun here. Your tenderloin goes on top of that. Look how beautiful that is. Let's get a camera angle here. Dang! Golden brown and crispy. That's what matters in the fry world, right? Seasoning your flour and getting that crispy crust. So the tenderloin goes on the bun, followed by your favorite cheese. Penguin Point never put cheese on them, always requested it. And then your restaurant style pickles goes on top of that as well to give it a nice, clean, crisp taste. I'm a pickle guy, always like extra. Then that wonderful sauce goes on top of the bun. Now, one thing about the Wally sauce and Penguin Point is they were liberal about it. They weren't chintzy whatsoever on it, so we want to make sure we put enough on there. And one thing that was iconic to their actual tenderloins, not just the Wally sauce, was the shredded cabbage that went on top instead of lettuce. Yes, you heard me right. It is a shaved shredded lettuce, cabbage. I'll get it right the second time, so we're going to put that on top. And then we're going to garnish it like that. And then we'll see you guys for the next video. And remember, season your flour.